With the price of chicken feed going up, we are looking at growing a lot more food for our chickens. And I'm going to be putting in a really big vegetable garden at the new place. And so I'm going to tell you about the things that I'm planning on growing in that garden. I will be doing a lot of space for the chickens because we have a lot of chickens and I have a chicken crazy daughter who wants more chickens. So the more food we can grow for them ourselves, the better. What are you planning on growing in your vegetable garden to feed your chickens? Tell me about it in the comments below and you might give me some great ideas. I'm still looking for some ideas, especially ones that'll grow where it's not so warm. I'm going to run through some of the ones that I'm definitely going to be growing and some that you might be able to grow at your place that we might not be so great at growing here. I'm going to be growing a lot of perennial plants. My choice for perennials are one, they're a lot less maintenance because you only have to plant them once. There's no growing them from seed. Two, once they've got a good established root system, there's a lot less fluffing around with them once they're established as well. They're also some of the first ones to be ready to harvest in the springtime. They are really good at covering what's known as the hunger gap for the exact reason. They tend to be sort of more cold tolerant and more hardy, which is exactly what we need here. So for me, I've got a perennial kale that I'm going to grow a lot of. I have plans to put basically a lumpy garden, just a little hill all the way around the outside of my vegetable garden area, and on that I'm going to be growing a lot of this kale, and it grows up to 3 feet high, but you can cut it right back to ground level and it just comes away again. It is so hardy and so robust and the chickens really love it. The other thing I'm going to be putting on that mound is some sorrel. I think it's known as French sorrel. It's the big one, not those ones with the tiny little leaves that grow like a weed, although this one does kind of grow like a weed too, which for me is a good thing. And the chickens really enjoy it, and if they can access it, they demolish it. So I'm going to be growing a whole lot of that. And the other thing that grows really well, it's actually a weed, but the chickens love it, is chickweed. Comfrey is another one that I will be growing for the chickens to be eating because they send their taproots so far down into the soil that the leaves themselves have got a lot of minerals in them and are really beneficial for them to be eating. The next consideration is plants that have got a lot of protein, which is usually where your seeds and your legumes and your nuts and grains all come in there. So we can't grow corn very well here, although I am going to try a dent corn and see if we have any better luck with that. I do grow really good peas, so I plan on growing some peas and drying them to crush them for the chickens. You can also do field peas, quinoa or amaranth. They're both really high in protein, and depending on where you live, one of them will probably grow. One of them's better for colder weather and one of them's better for hotter weather, and I can't remember which one's which. One thing I will be growing is lots of buckwheat. Buckwheat makes a great cover crop, and then when you let it go to seed, the seeds are really good for the chickens. And it doesn't mind that it's colder here. It grows really well and goes to seed quite quickly. I will also be trying to grow some barley and some oats. I don't think it's hot enough really for wheat here, but they are also options. Often you can get the grain from the grain store to grow, especially if you get the organic stuff, and you can just flick it around and the chickens will happily take the seed heads. Another thing I'm not very good at growing, but I'm going to do my darndest to grow, are sunflowers. They're really high in beneficial oils and they are high in protein and they have a lot of seeds per head if you can get them to grow. My sunflowers seldom get above knee height, but I have had a few successes in some really good fertile soil, so here's hoping that at the new place we'll be able to get them growing. Of course, chickens will eat anything pretty much out of your garden that you can eat. Don't feed them the scraps from the tomato plants, like the actual plants themselves, and pepper plants. They seem to be toxic, so let's just not feed those to the chickens. But there are lots of other greens, and pretty much anything that you would eat, they will eat. And they can eat the scraps, you know, the outside leaves of cabbages and all those sorts of things. They can eat the tops off your carrots. They don't usually eat the bottoms of the carrots unless they've been cooked, but even potatoes, raw potatoes aren't so great for them, but if you cook them, they're perfectly fine. And so some of those higher calorie starch crops are an option as well. It's not recommended that you give them too many starchy things all at once, as it can upset their tummies, and give them something called sauerkraut, which can be really unpleasant. But pumpkins are good, and you can use the pumpkin seeds as a natural dewormer as well if they're all crushed up. And potatoes, sweet potatoes, all sorts of yams really, can be cooked and fed to the chickens in moderate to small amounts. And of course you can feed them plenty of herbs. There are a lot of different herbs that they will happily eat. Oregano is known as a health tonic generally, and you can just sprinkle it into their food. Thyme is another one that's also really good for them. I will be growing plenty of this stuff. I'm not entirely sure, I can't remember if it's Alexander's or if it's Japanese parsley, but it's one of the two, and it just proliferates here. It self-seeds and it comes up every season. Miner's lettuce is another one that my mother's got growing just along the road, which I'm planning on putting everywhere, just so that we've got some greens to help get us through the winter. The other thing to consider is what breed you're raising. Heavier chickens are going to need more food and more calories, and the lighter chickens generally can get away with less food. These chickens we're breeding, and I think we're up to the 3rd or 4th generation, and we're trying to breed them so that they can mostly forage for their own food, so that we're not having to buy them as much. And so we're breeding them particularly for ones that are thriving, mostly getting their own food. We're hoping over another couple of generations that we'll be able to get them so that if they're free ranging they'll be completely fine, and we'll still get decent amount of eggs out of them without having to put in large amounts of grain inputs. So we'll see how that goes. It is a bit of a project. Thankfully my chicken crazy daughter has decided that she would like to take it on as an opportunity to give it a go. So they are a mixture of a few different heritage breeds, as well as the Highline, which is one of the laying hybrids that you can get commercially in New Zealand. They're very similar to like a golden comet, or I can't think of any of the other names. They're essentially the same chicken, they just go by a whole lot of different trademark names. And so we have these guys up here. They are part Welsummer, part Highline, part brown leghorn, and part mystery chicken. And we also, at the moment, we've got an Araucana rooster in with them, so some of their babies will have Araucana genes in them, and we're just basically keeping the best of the best and keeping the eggs from them so that we can breed the next lot. This is partly to save on feed costs, obviously, but also to save us having to buy chickens constantly. And also I want chickens that we can let out and they can go in behind the cows and the sheep that we will eventually have, to clean up their poop, scatter it around, and basically help fertilise the paddocks without us having to supplement their feed too much. At the moment we've got them out in the food forest and they're doing a great job eating their way through the herbs and plants and grass and stuff that are in the food forest for them to eat.